Hi, I'm Catherine Wolthuizen. I'm the Energy and Water Ombudsman for Victoria. I'd like to start my presentation to you today with an acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land that I'm speaking to you from today, and that's the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I pay my respects to them, their elders, past, present and emerging. It's great to be able to talk to you about EWOV, the Energy and Water Ombudsman of Victoria. EWOV is an external dispute resolution scheme or an ombudsman scheme. An external dispute resolution is, I guess, that place where you go where you've tried to resolve an issue with your provider, you haven't had the result that you expect or that you're satisfied with, and you're thinking, where do I go? Where can I find someone to take another look at this, who's coming at it from an independent, impartial perspective that I can trust, and who will hopefully fix this issue I have for me. And that's what EWOV is here to do. We're here to provide that kind of service and provide it on a free, fair, impartial, independent basis for energy and water consumers and small businesses here in Victoria. And we're not the only ombudsman scheme working in Victoria. You may be aware of others. There's an ombudsman scheme, an external dispute resolution scheme for telecommunications, and there's one for banking and financial services. But we're a specialist. We just focus on energy and water. Anyone can come to us once they've been to their provider. We handle a whole range of issues in relation to energy and water. So if you've got an issue with supply, whether that's the quality of supply or the reliability of supply, whether it's, issues around energy supply that may have disrupted your appliances or power surges, these are all matters that we can look at. We can also look at matters relating to billing and payment and credit-related issues. So issues around if you have an unexpected high bill, if you don't understand your bill, if you're having trouble paying your bill and you don't think the provider is giving you enough help or enough time to pay the bill. We can also look at whether you're getting all of the concessions and rebates and other entitlements that you should be receiving based on your circumstances. And if you're having a problem with debt collection, that's something we can look at as well. We can also look at marketing issues. That is, the promises that have been made to you or the commitments that have been made to you by your provider and whether those are fair and reasonable and whether they've been honoured in the kind of service or products that you have received. We can also look at issues around infrastructure. That is, the physical presence of energy and water supply. So the poles and wires in the street or the sewage pipes or the water pipes and problems that may arise out of those, whether it's leakage, whether it's waste, whether it's issues around placement of poles or maintenance of poles and wires. And the way people can come to us is, first of all, we would generally expect someone who has a complaint to go to the business that is responsible for that product or service that the complaint is about. So that's where you would generally go to first, raise your complaint, and that business will have obligations to investigate and come back to you with an offer or a resolution. And it's up to you at that point whether that offer or resolution does the trick. If it's satisfactory, of course, you can accept it at that point and your complaint is resolved. And in many, many cases, that will be most people's experience with making a complaint. But there will be cases where the consumer receives an outcome, receives an answer from the business that doesn't meet their expectations, that doesn't fix the problem from their perspective, or doesn't seem fair. And at that point, people will generally look around and think, is there somewhere else I can go? Is there someone else who can take a look at this, who is expert? Because, of course, most people in the community aren't experts in energy and water regulation or codes or law, and we wouldn't expect them to be. That's what a service like EWOV is for. When we've finished our investigation, we'll give reasons to the parties, and at that point, if a consumer is satisfied with the outcome of the complaint, whether or not it's in their favour, that's the end of the process. if the decision is in favour of the consumer, it's binding on the business. So the business will have to go away and do what we say they need to do to put the matter right. So that's an important protection for consumers as well. That when you bring a complaint to EWOV, you're not committed to the outcome, but your provider is. The business is committed to the outcome. And that's important to give you security and confidence that if at the end of the day you don't accept our view of the complaint, you can go off and pursue your complaint elsewhere, whether that's with a tribunal or a court or directly with the provider. But in many cases, I'm happy to say, the consumers do accept the outcome of the complaint and recognise that, we've tried hard to find the right answer and find out what is fair and reasonable in light of all the available evidence, all the available and applicable law and regulation, and in light of the particular circumstances. So EWOV is funded by industry, and that's on the basis of, what's been called a polluter pays model, i.e. that industry funds EWOV because it recognises how important it is that consumers have access to that external, independent, free and fair source of investigation and resolution if they're going to have trust and confidence to participate in the market. But equally, industry also recognises that if we get a lot of complaints from a particular business, that they should pay their share. That if they're generating a lot of dissatisfaction, the cost of that should fall on the businesses that are generating those complaints. So most businesses will pay a fee to join EWOV, and then they'll pay charges per complaint to make it fair. That if you're generating a lot of dissatisfaction, if we're getting a lot of complaints coming through about a particular provider, then they'll be the ones who would largely be paying for those complaints to be investigated and resolved. So that's important too, because it means that consumers aren't paying when they come to us. That's a really important measure, so that there's no barriers to a consumer bringing a complaint to us. That they feel that it's straightforward and it's free. And what makes EWOV so important at the moment, of course, is that it's operating in a market, particularly in relation to energy, where there are some pretty significant challenges and changes underway. The first of these, and the most immediately pressing of these, relates to cost of living pressures. And I'm sure that's something that's well known to anybody watching this video today, that consumers are facing rising costs across the board because of inflation, particularly in relation to housing costs, but also in relation to energy costs. And as I'm recording today, we're expecting that energy costs could go up 30% in Victoria this year. And that's a significant increase for most households, on top of course, other cost pressures and rising prices that they're facing, whether it's in relation to rent, to housing, to food and groceries, to fuel expenses. And we really understand that pressure, and we're seeing it in our complaints. We do have high expectations of providers that they will provide consumers with all of the support that someone who is struggling to pay might need, that they are considering what payment arrangements, what rebates, what concessions, what advice in terms of managing costs they could be providing. And we do expect that those businesses are applying all of those supports to customers who might be struggling to pay their bills at the moment. And of course, where customers do find that they don't feel they're getting the help they need, or the help isn't enough, they can come to us and we will check that all of the right reliefs and supports have been provided by that business. And that's a really important safeguard at the moment, because we know that a lot of people who are finding themselves in financial difficulty or struggling to pay, it will be a very new, a very difficult experience for them. And they may not know that they have rights, not just to complain, but that a right to complain includes within it a right to complain about the level of support you're getting. At the same time, of course, we're going through transformation in our energy market to respond to climate change, to consider how Victoria as a state can reduce its emissions, and a lot of that is going to come from transition to renewable sources of energy. And we're excited about the role that EWOV can play in that as supporting trust and confidence in this new market, in these new forms of renewable supply, whether that is rooftop solar, whether that is batteries, whether that is new infrastructure to bring energy from new mass sources of supply, whether that's wind farms or solar farms, out in rural areas into our urban areas where, of course, so many people live and look to use that energy. So that's an exciting time, but also a period where we want to make sure that we're positioned to provide that trust and confidence by being able to take and investigate complaints people might have about some of those new developments in relation to renewable energy in particular. So that if someone has a complaint that they want to bring to EWOV, in general, what they would do is we would expect them to go to their provider first, whoever that may be, their water company, the company that operates the poles and wires and infrastructure, or their energy company, and raise it with them. But if they're not satisfied, then they do have the right to come to us. And we will register their complaint. Sometimes we'll look at the complaint and we'll offer to give the consumer a bit more information so that they can go back and try again with their business with a bit of empowerment following their advice from EWOV. Or if the consumer's in vulnerable circumstances, we're able to take it straight through to investigation. So investigation, which is either a consumer's complaint will go to investigation either because they're in vulnerable circumstances or they've been back to the business and just haven't been able to get a satisfactory outcome, a resolution to their complaint. And that's when we're able to look more deeply into the complaint, to seek evidence, to look at the circumstances, to assess the complaint against the code, standards, regulation that apply, and then engage, talk to the business about where they might have fallen short of those expectations and what it might take to put it right. And sometimes that'll be the business coming back saying, look, we agree, we need to put it right, this is what we're proposing to do. We may consider that to be reasonable and to fix the problem, in which case we'll say to the consumer, look, that seems fair and reasonable to us. And as far as we're concerned, the business is going to do what we think it should to put matters right. We do have the option, if the business doesn't come back with that kind of approach, to apply to go to a next stage and then to ultimately go through to a binding decision where it would be me as the ombudsman essentially telling the business, you need to take this action that we think is appropriate in order to provide fair and reasonable resolution to the consumer. But it's very rare that a matter would get through to that stage. And in general, matters are resolved much more quickly and informally through that investigation or conciliation stage. So in terms of some of the kinds of matters that we would see, I guess I've got a few scenarios that I thought might be useful to talk through. And these are very typical complaints that we might see coming through to our service. So the first one might be that you have a family staying with you over the summer holidays and you used your cooling appliances, your air conditioner on more than usual. And then, your guests have gone back home, but you get the energy bill and it's 3 times higher than you're expecting and money's already tight. You can't afford to pay the energy bill on time. What should you do? So first of all, you should talk to your provider because they will have obligations to make sure that you're on your best offer, that is the best kind of contract for you, to tell you about the power saving bonus. That's the $250 that the Victorian state government is making available to consumers that would probably be very helpful in this situation. They might look at your bill and consider how you could manage your usage further down the track in case your guests come back and put the aircon on 24/7. But also they do need to help you by offering you some payment assistance, so a payment plan to spread out the repayment of an unexpectedly high bill so that you're not having to pay it all in one go. And it's that kind of relief that we think is fair and reasonable and that businesses are required to provide in those circumstances. Another scenario might be that you've had some issue with your job, you've had an interruption to your income, you're not currently earning what you were, and you haven't been able to pay your electricity and gas bills. You've been really focused on finding a new job and you've probably been a bit stressed because of your circumstances, and so you haven't been responding to your provider's communications about your debt. They've been sending you texts or leaving voicemails, but you've been too focused on trying to get back on track to get in touch with them. And now you've been sent a disconnection notice. So what do you do? Well, first of all, look, please don't ignore the disconnection notice. It's a really serious matter, serious for both parties, because obviously that's something that would have a really significant effect on you, and you want to get in touch with your provider and talk about how you're going to get things back on track, get a payment plan in place, and they need to make sure that they're doing all they should by you to provide you with the support you need to get through what is hopefully going to be a short-term period of financial stress. They might see if you're eligible for a relief grant. They might see if you're eligible for other rebates and concessions. And they should be offering you a payment plan so that you can spread out your payments and make a contribution that is right for you, that you can afford, but that also means that you're chipping away at that debt even as you're looking to find your new job and get back on track. And then another scenario might be that you have a debt with your provider, but you receive a notice for debt collection. You thought you were on a payment arrangement with your provider. You're not sure how to keep your usage down, to keep your costs manageable, and you're not sure you're on the best deal for your situation. What should you do? Again, if you can contact your provider, they're subject to some pretty strong requirements here to give you help, to understand what are the costs, how you're incurring your costs, what could you change about your energy usage in a sensible, proportionate, sustainable way so that you're still getting the energy that you need, the essential energy that you need, but to keep your costs manageable. Could you be on a different plan or tariff? Are you eligible for any grants? These are all expectations that we have of providers, that they will work with you to help you if you're finding that your energy costs are beyond what you can reasonably manage. So those are some of the complaints that we receive, and that's a pretty common. Those are pretty common themes that we see in our complaint volumes, and certainly probably about half the complaints we receive relate to billing issues that consumers might have, and all of those sorts of issues around affordability of bills and whether the business has provided the right kind of assistance and support in line with its obligations and our expectations. But equally, we see an awful lot of other complaints, so land cases, and those are the types of complaints where an energy or a water provider, they're what are called assets. So those are power lines, energy and water meters and water mains, where they've been placed, and issues around maintenance of those assets. And also consumer and community concerns about the way land or property has been affected by the business's activities or their assets or their power lines and pipes. So, and one of the particularly interesting areas that we're engaged in more recently is in relation to new renewables infrastructure. So that is the big transmission lines that are intended to bring energy from solar farms or wind farms out from rural and regional areas where they'll be developed into Melbourne, where the energy will be mostly used. And of course, in a state like Victoria, with a lot of farming land and a lot of regional communities, it can be very contentious about where those power lines are intended to go and who's affected by new towers and lines going across their land, and who's impacted by that new infrastructure sitting in the landscape. So that's an important new area of activity for us in giving those communities and landowners somewhere to go to raise their concerns about how that whole process has been entered into, the kind of quality of communication and engagement, and of course ultimately where those power lines and poles and wires are going to go, and what compensation might be available for anybody who's impacted by those new routes. We're also increasingly seeing complaints about solar and particularly rooftop solar panels coming into our service. And we're an existing member of our scheme, so particularly an existing energy provider or distribution company is involved, we can look at that complaint, but we can't look at all the complaints that come to us because not everybody is currently a member of our scheme. So that's something we're hopeful will change in the future, so that if consumers have an issue with their someone who's helped them get rooftop solar, that they'll be able to come to us and we'll be able to use our expertise in solar and energy more broadly to investigate and provide a satisfactory outcome. So it's busy but exciting times at EWOV. We recognise that we're a really important part, not just of the transition to renewables in Victoria, but also to providing relief to consumers who are finding accessing and the affordability of energy and water a struggle in times of rising prices across the board. So we do feel very relevant and we do want to be available to all Victorian consumers, to the Victorian community and to Victorian small businesses to ensure that they get the energy and water that they need, and that we're able to shore up trust and confidence in energy and water markets by helping them work better. In addition to our complaint handling function, which is really core to what we do, we also have some other really important areas of work. And one of those is about using our unique data and insights that come out of that casework to build up a clearer picture of the kind of experience consumers are having in the Victorian energy and water market, and to share the insight and to tell other people about that clearer picture so that they can use that information, draw on our knowledge when they're thinking about how the market should be operating. So we do have an insights and engagement team as well that looks to tell the story that comes out of our casework and share that story with policymakers in government and elsewhere, with businesses so that they can improve the quality of the service and products that they provide, and to the regulator so it knows of any emerging issues occurring in the market, and with consumer and community organisations as well to inform their thinking and their advocacy so that they are aware of issues and where those markets might be falling short of what the community expects. So that's a really important other area of our work, because not many organisations have that kind of wide view of the experience of consumers across energy and water, and given how important those markets are because of the essential nature of energy and water, we see it as really important that we work hard to understand emerging issues and share that information with anyone who might need to know about it. So just in summary, EWOV is free, fair, independent and an efficient service for Victorian energy and water consumers and for the community more general in relation to energy and water issues. If you've got a problem that relates to energy and water that you haven't been able to resolve with the business responsible for the supply of that energy and water, then you can come to us and we will look at that matter for you. We might give you more information to go back to the business so that you can have another go at it, or we might go straight through to investigation, depending on the circumstances. We can take account of relevant law, codes and regulation. We also look at good industry practice and community expectations of what is fair and reasonable treatment and outcomes for consumers of energy and water, and we apply that in the work that we do, having particular regard to the available evidence and the individual circumstances of the complainant and the complaint. We take the information and the knowledge that we build up through our case management work, and we apply that to inform anybody providing energy and water so that they can keep improving how they do that, but also to regulators, consumer and community organisations and the Victorian Government to inform how the market is regulated and how it operates. We recognise that our role is highly relevant at a time when many Victorian consumers and small businesses are doing it tough due to increased cost of living. And we see an important part of our role as making sure that energy and water businesses in Victoria are providing consumers and small businesses with the support and relief and assistance that they're entitled to and that they need. And we stand by as a point where consumers can come and check that they've received all of that support that they're entitled to. And we also see our role as critically important to shoring up trust and confidence in new renewable sources of energy as Victoria moves through a radical transformation of the energy market in particular, with a view to reducing emissions and shifting where consumers get their energy from fossil fuels through to new renewable sources. So it's probably never been more important or exciting to have an ombudsman scheme like EWOV working in the market. We take that role very seriously and recognise that we're here to serve all participants in those markets to make sure everyone gets what they need.